Okay, hello, 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 hello. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to the live stream tonight. Here, let me get rid of this logo, shall we? Okay. Jeremy, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Good evening, my goodness. It has been a long time since we've done this, and for those of you
It
who are
really has.
it has. For those of you who are watching on a live stream or retroactively on YouTube, we're doing things a little bit different tonight. And first, we'll introduce ourselves. Hi, my name is Ryan Wilkie, creator producer of Tales of Valhalla: The Aftermath Chronicles. The reason that you're probably watching this live stream is because of TOV. And we released the second season, like all the episodes of the second season last week. Yes, finished that. And we have a special guest tonight. So Jeremy, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Jeremy Unit, and I have been helping out with this project since it first started. It's actually the series back in, was it 2015? I think it was.
I think it's even been like several years, because 2015
Yeah,
is
it's
when
been,
we started season 2 and 3. Actually,
yeah.
we were
Wow.
just finishing season 1.
Even earlier, yeah. It's been a minute. I offered to help out with it's kind of like the Heroscape lore behind Tales of Valhalla, and I was invited to kind of like give the background story and everything like that, kind of like discuss the history of the game, and have been watching this project grow and become phenomenal over these years. So, and just really, really excited seeing the season 2 finished and everything like that. So it's fantastic. Been around just kind of watching and supporting, and it's been a really cool thing to see. So.
Yeah, and it's great to have you involved to try and make sense of the Heroscape universe a little bit and try and connect it as much as possible. I mean, usually on these live streams on Wednesdays, I'm doing a lot of production video editing on the seasons. I mean, last week we obviously premiered episodes 9 and 10 of season 2. And tonight we are going to have some fun, talk about season 2. And I thought about this. I thought about doing this a long time ago when it came to when these seasons would come out, as we go back, talk about some of the lore and aspects of some of these episodes. In what way could it be connected, whether in gameplay or the lore and history, and is there any connection? And so we're going to talk with Jeremy about that tonight. But while we're talking about it, if you see on the screen here, we're actually going to be playing the episodes. So the amount of time that the episodes go for, that's how much time we'll have to talk about each subject. It'll be something to watch while we are discussing it, just so we have a little bit of visual representation of what we're talking about. There's so much to talk about when it comes to going back episode 1 of season 2. But what we're going to primarily talk about happens in the first few minutes in the prologue scenes, where we have the two battles, and then after that we see the well springs and the well springs disappearing. And this isn't a new concept in Tales of Valhalla. It's mentioned in season 1, but we get a visual representation of the well springs, what they look like, and that they've disappeared, so there's no power struggle anymore for them. They are completely gone. And it looks like Jeremy found a way to get himself right side up. Yes! What we will talk about then, as we see these two battles, and these battles are wonderful. I enjoy watching them every time. It's like it's my own Lord of the Rings prologue. Fantastic. When it comes to the well springs disappearing, I don't think anyone has really ever thought of that type of thing happening. At least not as far as I know. So Jeremy, I mean, what do you think about that? Would that ever be like a way to play Heroscape, or to write about it in the lore or storylines? Because there's a lot of custom storylines that Heroscapers do. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's a really, really cool idea. First of all, because the way the story was set up from the very beginning with Craig Van Ness's vision, he the well springs gave them access to be able to summon all the units for their armies and to be able to fight and get the power. And most of the time, it was always about the well springs. Everything that they did, every fight that they encountered, every effort they made was to secure another well springs. But never have they said, and never have they brought it up, what would have happened if they lost their power, right?
Mhm.
There hasn't really been a mention of it. And well springs being a natural part of the planet could eventually dry up. We have these situations in our own life with aquifers and stuff like that drying up, or just like desert effects, things like that.
Mhm.
So if we're talking about a natural source of water that imbues magical powers drying up, then essentially all those powers are gone, and anyone that's affected by them would also be affected as well. So when I saw it, when Brian brought up that idea to me and I thought about it, it made a lot of sense, as so much as being able to kind of show what happens when you rely too much on a certain thing.
Yeah,
Really,
and
really cool.
what would be the consequences of that? I mean, because you would have
Oh
everybody
yeah.
who has been taken to Valhalla. How are they going to get home? You
hmm
know, is
They
there a way to
they
get
were
back?
supposed to, like, as far as I recall, I think on the forums, Craig mentioned that he was trying to get to a point where he could tell a story about them either going home or getting a chance to go home. And then of course the discontinuation. So
Mhm.
that kind of died out. There was no opportunity to be able to reflect or see that conclusion, and so it's up in the air.
People that like either get the hints or not. I kind of like time it to where the well springs disappear when the game discontinues. Um, it's kind of like a nudge towards the companies a little bit. Um,
Like, you listening?
it's well, and it kind well, it kind of just gives a connection between the real world and the world of Valhalla. At least as far as like the stop motion world is concerned. So there's some type of connection between us here in reality and these characters within TOV. Even with that, even if it's just that little connection, like the whole time. And of course, you have Toothpick who fourth wall breaks all the time. Um,
Yeah, I love that. I laugh every time. Like, I love the fourth wall breaking stuff.
so yeah, so okay, so that is
Cool stuff.
that is about the well springs disappearing and what it means for this universe. So let's move on now. Yeah, we're only 10 minutes into episode 1, so I am going to just stop it. If you want to see the rest of the episode, it is on the Tales of Valhalla YouTube page. Just
Check it out.
yeah, check it out. Find the season 2 playlist, and you can see all the episodes there. So let me go ahead, and then I'm going to move forward to episode 2, where the Airborne Elite are visiting the dead city, and I spell this wrong. It's Laur, and it's Lar, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
Lore.
Yeah. I love the concept of having the city because you just see them outside of it when they walk in, and you see that there's a bunch of ruins. But when it comes to the dead city itself, I know that Valhalla itself has like civilizations that have been wiped out, rebuilt, wiped out,
hmm
within the story. So in that region of Valhalla, Jeremy, I'm gonna just start this episode again. Would there be like a city like this that's in ruins that the Urban Elite could experience, like within the actual history of Heroscape or within the game? Could that be a game scenario?
I would think so, definitely, because Lauer is set. If you get a chance to check the map out, and what's really cool is as you watch this series, Ryan's placed the map, uh, like kind of like you get the zoom in action. You kind of
Mm-hmm.
see the camera zoom on the different regions
And provide a
that
little
they are currently
flash
at.
on where the scene's going to be located.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely, yeah. You take a look at that map, and you'll see that Laura as as a region, instead of like a nation of sorts. It's smack dab right in between Nastralond, that's Yandar's territory. That's so. As a quick backstory element, the Valkyrie Generals are also, prior to the war, most of them were known as Archkyrie, and that means that was a title that were given to people that were in charge of like provinces or like leadership, and they had a council where they would meet up for government decisions and things like that. And so most of the people that have power in this planet had political power prior to imbuing themselves with the power of the Wellsprings, and then therefore were given the Valkyrie tile as kind of like a wartime title. And so Nostralund is where Yandar is situated. That's where his castle is. That's his main focus, his main hub. They say that's where the final city of freedom was located. And if that city fell, that would have been the end of the war, that kind of stuff. And Laur is right smack dab in that, like the passage to get to that province. And because of that, you would know for a fact, like we already understand Utgar is being ruthless, relentless, and he's throwing his forces at mass amounts of orcs and Yamaro. He's sending groups and groups and groups of them through these nations on just obliteration raids, like almost like at a kind of like a horde level of fighting, where he would just overwhelm everything in his sight to then take that land and then prepare to head into Nostralund. That's what that continent, or that region specifically, was the height of a lot of battles in that time frame. So it was just bad geographic location for the most part. They were just right smack dab in the middle between the main two armies.
Yeah, and for Tales of Valhalla, the place would be pretty calm because now all armies and factions have retreated, and are just like bunkering their time. So lots of places that would have open battles are technically kind of calm and not teeming with armies at the moment. So yeah, just for fun, I think the most comments I get from people who watch the show is they say, I love your use of the wound tokens and how it signifies, just the blood and wounds. And Lieutenant Dan throws a grenade at a bunch of orcs that are in a pile, and basically you just have wound tokens that just go
That was cool.
everywhere. And it's the most amount of wound tokens used within the series so far. It provides a practical effect, and I don't have to worry about inserting a digital effect. So that's just my filmmaker perspective. But what are your thoughts on that, Jeremy?
When I first saw the wound markers being used to signify damage, I laughed. I thought it was great. Like, I was like, that is cool. Like, that was a decision, creative-wise, I thought was really fascinating. It was, for those that play Heroscape, very, significant, because then they could look at that and be like, oh, hey, I know what that is. Because the thing is, the wound marker mechanic, right? It's almost a kind of like a legacy kind of aspect of the Heroscape game, because we've had wound markers as part of the game, and you use that, so whenever your heroes take damage, you put the wound marker on them to signify they're one less than the life marker on their card. And then of course, when you have the same amount of wound markers as there is the number on the card, that character's dead. All right. And so that's all it's really been. It's just kind of like that element. And of course, those that have played Heroscape for a long time can sympathize with me, vacuuming wound tokens up on accident, or finding them under couches. You're just like, you're cleaning up, and then there's a wound token, under a chair, and you're like, how did that get there? There's just it's part of the Heroscape experience.
There they are, and Explodiarmus and kaboom. Ooh, that's nasty. Okay, and moving on. The next episode is Jandar. And as Toothpick says in this episode where he breaks the fourth wall, he's like, he informs the audience, there's a lot of talking in this episode.
Nope.
But one of the important things we're talking about in this episode is the fact that Jandar is bodiless. He's powerless. And all he has really is foresight and his voice. And he's stuck in one spot. He can't move. He's just there. They discuss in here, because of the Wellsprings disappearing, and because the Valkyrie Generals were so connected to that magic, when the Wellsprings disappeared, in a sense, so did they. At least their power and everything that they were. For at least Jandar became bodiless, and he just ended up in a place to where he couldn't he couldn't be, he couldn't move, and so they discuss, okay, what is happening then with the other Valkyrie generals. So it's just an interesting concept. It's something that I think is just a chain reaction of what would happen if the Wellsprings would disappear. So this is another concept that, I mean, is probably not in lore and is probably not a game scenario that anybody's ever thought of. So your thoughts, Jeremy, on this, like what connection it could have with the lore or the game, and yeah, thoughts in general.
Essentially, what's going on here, to help kind of explain the reason why, is that the well springs, when these characters drank the water, right? It was essentially mutating. It was giving them. It made them. It made their wings larger. It gave them a sense of youth. It says that they stopped aging. That was a big part of it. They stopped aging. All right. Essentially the idea of aging is that your cells stop having the ability to replicate. So that's essentially what the water was doing to their bodies, right? It was literally affecting their cells, so
Mm-hmm.
they weren't aging anymore. So their cells weren't replicating constantly. They stopped at that point. So you being able to imagine, if the water is affecting their cells directly, if it dries up, then their bodies would dry up. Their bodies would vanish. It essentially calls into it. If it affects their age, if it affects their body, if it mutates them and it gives them powers, when that water's gone, so is their power.
It makes
So
scientific
yeah,
sense.
I mean, it makes science, like, you take the science of aging and you figure out how the water is affecting aging, and then you dry up the water. I mean, so so it works. I like it. I thought it was a great idea.
So for episode 5, there's a little bit to where we have our heroes, our gang, our fellowship of of Yandar's people, going into Uller because they need Morsbane's power to teleport them to the Takala jungle. So we notice that Morsbane likes to talk a lot in this during this scene, and what he likes to talk about is his own backstory. And we'll be seeing a bit more of Morsbane come season 3. But when it comes to this aspect, this is actually about Heroscape lore, gameplay accurate as you could possibly get when it comes to Morsbane explaining his backstory. So you want to explain that a little bit, Jeremy?
Yeah. So what was really cool, just to give a heads up to anyone that's introducing themselves to the Heroscape story. The way it worked out was, as Heroscape was released, right, people could go on the website and they could see the characters that were introduced in the new set. And Morsbane was one of those kind of like continuation stories, if the best way to explain it, because it pulled it pulled a story from that included a character that was introduced in Wave 2, and then introduced a character from Wave 4. There you go. That's what it was. It was Wave 4 had two units that were connected to a Wave 2 unit, and then all the stories kind of just linked up. And so the units in question are Morsbane. He was included, and then Kosumet the Dark Lord was the unit, or
Mm-hmm.
the Wave 2 character, and then Sudima, which is the mummy character. And the three of them are all kind of in the same plot. And Morsbane, he describes his own backstory. He explains that he's ninth generation elf banisher, and carries this family tradition of banishment and the power of the rod of negation. And so Morsbane made himself a target. Like, I mean, honestly, the moment he was fielded, if I saw him on the other side, everything's after him. Everything's after him. Get him, kill him. Do not let him take my powers away, because I built my entire strategy off of these powers. If I lose them, it's done. But yeah, the whole plot that he describes in the episode, it all comes from these units. They describe them in their bios. Sudima was a threat. The Banishers had to face the threat. Kosumet was as a member of the Wolves. He joined forces with the Elves to fight Sudima, but at the last minute betrayed Marhana, which is Morsbane's mother. And then,
Mm-hmm.
because of that betrayal, Morsbane was then became the uh, heir to the banishment, or the rod of negation. And so he mentions that in his story. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to uh, get that vengeance. against
he
Kozumet
wants
and
to make
against
sure the
Kadima.
whole world knows.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah,
And
definitely.
that's
He
and
says
that's
it in
just
the
to give
show.
him just that personality. I mean, it's a backstory. It's the original backstory, but you try and throw in the comedy as well
Oh, and it's great.
for
It's
that
great.
character. Yeah, and we'll see a bit more of that with him come season 3. And yeah, it's one of the things I look forward to is having him more in season 3. So now this happens at the end of episode 6, and it's Estavara, and Estavara shows that basically she's controlling the spiders that will end up attacking the Airborne Elite and Company in the next episode. And to do that, I show a glowing yellow eye from her,
A really
and
cool
then
animation.
I transfer the video to a glowing eye of the spider to make it looks like that she can see what they see. She's in control what they control, and I got that inspiration from the fact that within the game mechanics, she actually has a connection with the spiders. I mean, I don't know about if she has that in like the history of the lore, but we're about to ask Jeremy and see what his thoughts are on that.
So we're going to have to kind of like dive into a different world. Wizards of the Coast made the decision to field Dungeons and Dragons as the theme for the next wave, and that this was going to be kind of like a segue in a way that it would help players learn more about the Dungeons and Dragons world, introduce people into Dungeons and Dragons, and also introduce them in Heroscape. All right. It was like a sales tactic of a way. It was trying to get people to get more familiar with these products, and hopefully in that process would boost sales, so that way Heroscape would be able to get back to where it was before the recession. And so, in theory, it was a good idea, and it may have not worked out as planned, but as a result, Heroscape became intrinsically bound to the lore of Dungeons and Dragons. Estavara is a drow arachnomancer, and what the arachnomancer is, it was a prestige class. So we're talking about an option that was available after you leveled certain classes, base classes in the I think it was 3.5 edition was when they introduced prestige. And for the drow, they would gain the arachnomancer class, and an arachnomancer is essentially a mage or a sorcerer whose entire magical base ties into spiders. And the reason why this is because the Drow worship Loath, and Loath is a goddess of spiders, right? She's essentially a demon queen, right? It's the lore is intense. Loath has been around forever, right? Like Loath is older than I am, so it's like, and
Hmm.
her story has been she's been a goddess, she's been a demon, she's fought demons, she's sided demons, she's fought gods, she's been all over the place, right? And the Drow worship her. And if you get to a certain point where, she considers you valuable, she gives you the ability to command Spider. That's why Estavara has that ability in the game, right? She was summoned in as an arachnomancer, so now spiders obey her every command. Unfortunately, the game discontinued before we got any Loath specific spiders, because I
Mm-hmm.
mean, based on the text of the card, it was definitely suggested we were going to get some Utger themed spiders and not, Aquila's spiders, because Aquila's spiders came from Valhalla. They came from that jungle she lived in. So they didn't really have any connection with Estevar prior to Estevar summoning. So there were definitely opportunity. There was plans for spider units, additional spider units or arachnid units that were going to be more Ugarthane, more aspect of Loath, maybe something like that. And so
You have something like a fight between Morrow, spiders, and zombies. That
yeah,
would
they
have
would
been.
have been like the mind, like Ugar just realizing he summoned everything that would have never listened to him, like, like just being terrible overall. Like, just like, why didn't you summon anyone that would have actually like joined you properly? Why were you constantly summoning things that wanted to rebel against you? I don't understand, man.
And we're getting to the end of this episode. So yeah, and so with when it comes to I know it's like she doesn't control the four leg spiders directly within the game mechanics. I think they get like some type of boost, right? Or she gets some type of boost for them. Is that right?
I actually I brought the card
Oh, there
to
you go.
take a look at it. It is any arachnid figures that you control roll one additional attack die.
There you go.
So, and boosts like that, like it sounds like a small boost, but trust me, adding any bonus to
Oh yeah,
attack will
it helps.
never it helped you, but it was
Mhm.
never fun to deal with.
And with that, we're on to episode 7. Because some of these episodes are really short. So no, it's good to get that background and backstory on
Yeah.
Estevara. And
I love D&D, so
oh
I
yeah,
can talk about D&D forever.
there you go. During this fight scene, which is I think it's one of the most fun fight scenes out of season 2. Um, you have shotgun. I think hit 2 or 3 spiders at once. So within the game mechanics, a Johnny Shotgun Sullivan, can he actually do that? Because I know he's got a shotgun ability.
Hmm.
And would he? Is it possible for him to hit 3 miniatures at once with his shotgun ability?
Yes. So the way it works, Shotgun
Yes.
Blast special attack was essentially you pick a target, and anyone adjacent to that target also got affected by the attack. Um, the only way that, I mean, as far as dice goes, if you were lucky, you could kill 3 targets at once.
For sure.
You just had to roll high and they had to roll low, right? And of course, if you managed to it was just kind of like luck of the draw, I suppose. But like low defense enemies, like had nothing against shotgun blast.
That game mechanic, that's cool to know, and I think I knew that in advance when I planned out that shot. But either way, it just looks cool for that shotgun
Hmm.
blast just to wipe out those 3 spiders. Um,
Oh yeah, no, it was a really well done shot. Uh, just like that whole section, you just like cut that section, watch it. His his the way he like responds to it too. He's so like suave, and
yes.
just poof. I'm like, man, shotgun, why are you so cool?
Now we're moving on to episode 8, and we're talking about because now this is a fun fight scene because we're dealing with elemental power. We're dealing with Kurok, and we're dealing with a couple of the prime elementals, particularly the fire, air,
Hmm.
and water elementals, and them showing off some of their power. And I think you can actually have them as a new game mechanic to where you could link them with the different characters because there's certain ways that Heroscape does this anyway. And I don't know if that's the case for because these are D&D characters as well. Whether that can fit the background of D&D, and as well as fitting into wanting to play it within a Heroscape miniature game. So, what are your thoughts on that, Jeremy?
So just kind of like build off what you were saying, the idea of one unit being able to give powers to another unit is actually the mechanic he's talking about is the Viking warriors. So whenever the
Mm-hmm.
Viking warriors are slain, right, you could place instead of placing their unit on the card after their defeat, you would place that unit on anyone else's card. And as long as that unit was on top of that card, it was like a +1 to attack, or +1 to defense, or +1 to I think movement was Elgrim's ability. He'd make characters faster if his spirit was on a card. And so mechanics sound. I think is really cool that you did that using a hero skin mechanic that hasn't been really they didn't really hash out that mechanic after they kind of just kept it in the Viking zone, I believe. Like it was just Viking characters were the only ones that could give their power after their death. I don't recall if that was ever brought back. And just considering as well, you've taken the opportunity to explain to the viewers that these are the prime elementals, right? So it's not just a regular elemental. These
Mm-hmm.
elementals are, in fact, kind of central to their aspect, to what they represent. As far as elementals go, in the D&D universe, right? Everything. There's a material world, right? You have the earth or the world. In Dungeons and Dragons, each world is different, so they're basically part of these one element realities. And they're pulled into the world of Toril under the command of elementalists or under the command of magicians or anything like that needs the power of an elemental in the magic or to summon them specifically or use them as energy sources, pull them into the real world, right? And so essentially being able to have an understanding of what they are helps explain why they're specifically water based, air based, all their powers, so on and so forth. And in addition, the concept of a prime elemental would work really well in Dungeons and Dragons because in these elemental planes, they have hierarchies, they have governments, right? Their government and their system of organization may not make sense to us as mortal beings because they are one element species, one element specific. So it makes sense to them, but not to us. And so if they were to come into our world, then we'd be like, whoa, we wouldn't be able to understand how they organize themselves. But essentially, because they're already developed in the story of Tales of Valhalla as a prime elemental, them having more power than other elementals would make a lot of sense because then they would just be pulling from that idea that they're using the hierarchy system of their home world in Valhalla. So,
Yeah, and it's
yeah.
funny how when you were talking about like wizards and elementals extracting the elementals, that at that moment when we're playing the episode video, that's what Kuruk was doing. He was pulling the
Oh,
elementals
wow.
toward him.
Nice.
So not nice timing. And we are actually we are on to episode 9. Now the subject we're going to talk about in episode 9 is another fun one, and this is a connection with the Heroscape lore and game mechanics. It's a Tulbakra's teleportation ability. Go ahead and take it away, Jeremy. With that, then.
Yeah. Uh, Tolbrakwa is one of those characters I'm sad about, honestly. Essentially, he came about around that era. I've described it a couple times throughout the live stream. That recession and then the weird IP transfer and then all the weird stuff that they weren't really able to release more content. And then when they finally got a chance to release content, it was D&D themed instead of original. Tolbrakwa got like he didn't get his story because of that, right? He didn't get a chance to explain why he did what he did, but they kind of just dropped it on us out of nowhere. The development team,
Sure.
I think this was one of Craig Van Ness's original concepts before
The
they
miniature, by
moved
the
it over to
way,
Wizard Coast.
it's an awesome miniature. It just
Oh, it's so cool.
he looks sleek, and he just, I mean, he's tiny, but he just looks
He just
dangerous.
you want to know so much about him,
Yes.
and we have nothing. We have nothing. They weren't able to release anything. Uh, I tried poking for that kind of stuff, like I've asked people in charge, like, hey, you want to give us that content? And I mean, I can't, right? So all that's left to us is just imagination. But essentially, Tobacra, like we, most of us were able to kind of like discern. I would get like I just from from his design and from what he suggested was that he's like a future version of the Morrow,
Mm-hmm.
like some sort of like the Morrow was always depicted as this massive swarm, this massive horde that was in active war on their homeworld, and then he came about, and it was just like based on the concepts that we understand from the Morrow, it was like a future where the Morrow won the fight, I guess, and he was just one of those like leaders or something to that effect. But he's a cool character, and
Yeah.
seeing him teleport and do all those things fits with his idea of just like I mean he's sneaky. He jumps around all over the board,
Mm-hmm.
dropping enemies everywhere.
He makes for a good
You
spy too, and that's
oh
what he
yeah
kind of is primarily in
oh yeah
season 2. And then he takes more action at the very end here when he gets Toothpick and kidnaps Toothpick, which kind of goes with the game mechanic that he can transport other figures. So I'm like, well,
mm-hmm.
why not him transport an enemy so the enemy gets taken out of the field to the dismay of the enemy's allies. Now moving on to episode 10, and this is a pivotal story plot device, and we've been able to keep this secret, and that's the Airborne Elite's secret, and really something that can explain like the original Heroscape introductory animation video introducing the game to where you see Sergeant Drake Alexander fighting in France in 1945. I got the idea to be like, well, what if they were in France fighting, but it was because they were acting out a play for the troops and their primary goal was to sell war bonds in the United States, so enact these military things. But they traveled to Europe because the war was finishing, and by mistake they were given live ammunition, hence this live grenade being thrown at Sergeant Drake Alexander in the video, and instead of it being a fake, it's actually real, hence Jandar transporting them, or they would have, died from that quote-unquote accident, as Lieutenant Dan says. As far as introducing something into the Heroscape background and backstory, it's just something that I wonder what Craig Van Ness would probably think about this if he ever knew about this type of storyline twist. But what are your thoughts, and what about what are people's thoughts about that specific animated video, and how the Airborne Elite comes into play with that?
I honestly, I'm not very well versed, and with just like World War II stuff. So I remember you mentioned that earlier with your during the live premiere of 9 and 10, and thinking about it, I was like, that's a really, really nice opportunity to kind of use that material that's we've been presented and create something unique to the series, right? That works in the setting, and then just makes the characters much more relatable. Because now, like, and I mentioned it, at least for myself, being able to watch them explain this and explain their worries about how maybe they're not, why are they being picked for this, because they weren't meant to be here at all. That is a very relatable sentiment to most people. They didn't give us a lot of content in the original stories. We have the bios, and the bios maybe were a couple paragraphs of that. And poor Craig Van Ness, he even explained, he said that he was the original writer of the bios, and he admitted to not doing as well as he could have. Like he wrote them, and he didn't like that he wrote them. And so when Colby Dodge, he's on the Heroscape forums, Truth, he was given the position to write the bios, and I think he wrote Wave 8. I want to say Wave 7, Wave 8, Swarm Tomorrow. Those units, those got Colby Dodge's writing, and definitely you can kind of see the shift in the tone and the story, and the elements being used to explain the story. And you're like, oh, someone else is writing these, but that's just it. The original characters, more so, if anything, right, were homages to things that Craig Van Ness liked more than actually having kind of like historical basis. So Craig Van Ness mentions on the forums what Drake Alexander and the Airborne Elite are a reference to. They're a reference to one of the movies, and I can't remember specifically what it's.
Maybe Saving Private Ryan or something.
Yes, no, that's it. Saving Private Ryan. That was, he said, it was one of his favorite movies.
For sure.
He made the characters, to basically just be a homage to that, right?
Absolutely.
So in all effort, right? So for Craig Van Ness, it was a movie reference, and for Tales of Valhalla, it's a reference to our own version. The version of the characters who weren't really actually soldiers, but now have an opportunity to serve an even better force or a better cause.
Yeah, for sure. And I have a unique perspective in this too, because my grandfather was a World War II soldier, one of the gentlest men you'd ever want to meet. He was a really nice guy, great grandfather, and it was great to able to talk with him a little bit about his past. And my dad actually wrote a book on him. So I have that.
Oh, wow.
I have that little bit of reference.
That's really cool.
Yeah, from that. And actually, Harold Gimp, who's one of the Airborne Elite characters, is loosely based off my grandfather, because my grandfather's first name was Harold. So it's homage towards
cool.
him.
That's really cool.
I give that for it. So, yeah, and so yeah, I have a little bit of perspective on that, and yeah, Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, all are great influences, for those characters. And we're about to see here at the end of episode 10, where Raylan says, This quest is just getting started. It is really case season 2. It was basically an opening act, preparing for everything that is to come, which is season 3. And if you thought season 2 was good, season 3 is just going to bring everything together, and there'll be a lot of twists and turns and character alliances and plot developments, and there's going to be just so much stuff in season 3. With that, we are out of topics because we're out of episodes, and I hope we can do this again after season 3 is out and talk about all the interesting things that are going to happen in season 3. So Jeremy, I thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully we'll have you back sooner than a year from now. We'll see. If you want to go ahead, plug your stuff in, because I know that you've been doing some things lately when it comes to, I believe, D&D and well as other things. So go ahead and plug yourself. Tell us websites, and I'll definitely connect stuff in the links below once this comes out on YouTube. Sweet. So go ahead.
The creative project's known as the Eslam Call It. All right, you can look that up. I have it on Instagram. It's on Facebook. It's on Twitter. I try to post a lot on Twitter. I try to get a lot of coverage on it, and it's going to cover both the book series I've been working on, and it's going to be kind of interactive. So they're going to be able to try to move on the major events, the major plot, to affect it to where the next story that comes out is going to be a direct result of their actions, of their game that they play or whatever. And it's going to be kind of like, how D&D does that with their seasons. I'm going to try to do something like that with the writing. So it's going to be a fun little thought experiment, little storytelling here and there. I've been really big on just creative worlds and being able to, with the lore obsessions that I have, I create my own setting based on what I've researched and kind of just explain that in a storytelling manner. So it's Eslam Call It. It's ESSALIM, and you can look that up. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook.
Please look them up. Please look them up. And so with that, I'm going to do what I always do when I end these live streams, is by saying, for those of you who are watching this on the Tales of Valhalla YouTube page, you are watching the edited down version of what is almost a 2 usually we go an hour, but a 2-hour session. So instead of 10 minutes, it's probably going to be, it's going to be fun to edit. It's going to be like 20 minutes or so. I don't know how long it's going to be, but it's going to be shorter than what will be on our Connector Productions page. So if you want to see the full amount of information of what we talked about when it came to season 2, the lore and the backstory of these characters, game schematics, lore, and whatever else, I'll keep on repeating this, go ahead and go to a link in the description below to go to the Connector Productions page, and you'll see the full live stream there, or you'll probably see it in the screen in front of me as well. But with that, thank you so much, everybody who was able to pop on the live stream and take a listen. Thank you retrospectively for everybody who is watching this on Tales of Valhalla or Connector Productions page. And have a great evening. Have a great week. Again, thank you so much, Jeremy, for joining us. And we will end this live stream. Have a good night, everybody. And yeah, go ahead, Jeremy. Sorry, you have last word.
No, I just love being able to participate, help out with this, and get to talk my Heroscape lore. The thing I was known on the forums most for was long-winded forum posts, so now I get to be long-winded in live stream.
Oh, absolutely. So it's great information.
Thank you, Ryan, for giving me the time.
Absolutely. So with that, all right. So we'll end this live stream. Everybody, have a good night, and we will see all of you later. Bye.